The morning of June 19, 1944, began with routine radar sweeps across the Philippine Sea. Task Force 58 had assembled under Vice Admiral Mark Mitscher into the mightiest naval striking force ever conceived. 15 fleet carriers carrying 956 aircraft, dominated by 475 Grumman F6F Hellcats. The force represented American industrial capacity at full throttle, a floating city of destruction riding the tropical swells. Beneath the surface, USS Albacore prowled the depths, her captain, Lieutenant Commander James Blanchard, maintaining contact with Admiral Jizaburo Ozawa's Japanese mobile fleet. Intelligence reports had been flowing into American command centers for weeks, decoded messages revealing Japanese intentions with remarkable clarity. The Z Plan, captured when Admiral Koga's aircraft crashed in the Philippine archipelago months earlier, contained the blueprint for what Tokyo called Operation Ago. Admiral Somu Toyota, commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, had declared with grim certainty, "The fate of the empire rests on this one battle." Ozawa had assembled 9 aircraft carriers: Taiho, Shokaku, Zuikaku, Junyo, Hyo, Ryujo, Chitose, Chiyoda, and Zuiho, representing the largest carrier striking force Japan could muster. From these floating fortresses, 430 carrier aircraft were poised for launch, supplemented by approximately 100 land-based aircraft. The Japanese strategy assumed overwhelming numbers would compensate for any tactical disadvantage. What the Japanese planners could not anticipate was that American technology had already rendered their assumptions obsolete. The disparity between American and Japanese naval aviation in June 1944 had become a chasm that no amount of determination could bridge. The fundamental problem lay not in courage or willingness to fight, but in the systematic erosion of Japanese pilot quality through 2.5 years of relentless attrition. Pre-war Japanese naval aviation had established itself as the world's finest, with pilots receiving 700 hours of intensive training before joining operational units. That system had collapsed under the weight of combat losses. Replacement pilots arriving in 1944 averaged barely 200 flying hours, some completing their training with fewer than 100 hours aloft. Many had never fired their weapons before entering combat. Some had performed fewer than 10 carrier landings. Navigation training was minimal. Instrument flying instruction was almost non-existent. The contrast with American pilot preparation could not have been starker. Naval aviators receiving wings in 1944 had completed a minimum of 600 hours of systematic instruction. American training bases in Florida, Texas, and California produced 10,000 naval aviators annually, each one thoroughly drilled in gunnery, formation flying, carrier operations, navigation, and instrument flying. The American industrial machine had transformed pilot training into a standardized process that turned out competent aviators with mechanical reliability. The Hellcat itself embodied the philosophy of American aircraft design, survivability through armor and firepower, rather than the Japanese emphasis on maneuverability achieved through light construction. The F6F weighed 12,598 pounds loaded, powered by a Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine producing 2,000 horsepower in standard configuration and 2,200 with water injection. Its 3-bladed Hamilton standard propeller with constant speed control delivered maximum speed of 380 miles per hour at 23,000 feet, with climb rate exceeding 3,000 feet per minute and service ceiling reaching 37,300 feet. The Hellcat could carry 250 gallons of internal fuel with provision for a 150-gallon drop tank, extending range to 530 miles. Most critically, it mounted 6 Browning .50 caliber machine guns, each firing 850 rounds per minute with 400 rounds per gun. These guns converged at 300 yards, creating a concentrated impact zone where a 2-second burst delivered 170 rounds into a target area roughly 6 feet in diameter. The Hellcat's defensive systems included 212 pounds of armor plating protecting the pilot, oil cooler, and oil tank, plus 1.5 inches of bulletproof glass capable of stopping 20mm cannon rounds. Self-sealing fuel tanks prevented the catastrophic fires that had plagued Japanese aircraft since the war's beginning. The Mitsubishi A6M50, by contrast, weighed 6,025 pounds loaded. Maximum speed was 351 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour slower than the Hellcat. The Zero carried no armor protection and no self-sealing fuel tanks. Its two 20mm cannon carried only 60 rounds each, while the two 7.7mm machine guns were nearly ineffective against American armor. The Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bomber could reach 339 miles per hour, but remained catastrophically vulnerable to any hit. Without armor or self-sealing tanks, a single incendiary bullet could ignite its fuel. The Nakajima B-6N JIL torpedo bomber suffered similar vulnerabilities while being slower and less maneuverable. These machines would fly into a technological trap they could not escape. At 0830 hours, Ozawa's attack coordinator launched the first Wave 69 aircraft consisting of 16 Zero fighters, 45 dive bombers, and 8 torpedo bombers. Launch time from deck to formation consumed 23 minutes. Cruising at 180 knots to conserve fuel for the return flight, the Japanese formation would require approximately 90 minutes to reach Task Force 58. What the Japanese aviators did not know was that American radar had already detected them. Radar operator First Class James Peterson had been tracking contacts across the Pacific for 14 months. His hands moved across the radar controls with the automaticity of long practice as he adjusted gain and sweep rate. The screen showed clear returns against minimal sea clutter. Weather conditions were ideal for radar detection. Clear skies, unlimited visibility, no precipitation to create false returns. At 1,000 hours, Peterson's scope erupted with contacts. Range 150 miles, bearing 260 degrees, altitude approximately 20,000 feet. He pressed the general quarters alarm and reached for the intercom. Bridge, radar. Large raid bearing 260, range 50 miles, Angels 20. Fighter director. Lieutenant Joseph Edgar plotted the intercept geometry on his status board. Enemy speed estimated at 80 knots, course roughly 80 toward Task Force 58. Time to intercept approximately 35 minutes if Hellcats launched immediately. The precision of aerial interception depended on accurate vector calculations and rigorous fuel management. Admiral Mitscher's response was instantaneous. Launch all fighters. Vector 260. Climb to Angels 25. The first Hellcat launched at 10:23 hours. Within 12 minutes, 40 F6F fighters were airborne and climbing toward the incoming raid. Each pilot had been briefed on Japanese tactics, aircraft recognition, and the critical importance of maintaining altitude advantage. The Hellcats climbed at 3,000 feet per minute, their powerful engines conferring a crucial edge in the race for altitude. Lieutenant Commander Charles Brewer led the 1st Division of Hellcats from USS Essex. 16 fighters in 4 plane divisions were climbing through 20,000 feet when radar operators called the bogies at 24,000 feet, 30 miles out and closing. "Tally-ho! Bandits 2 o'clock high!" came the radio call. The sky erupted with twisting contrails as Hellcats dove on the Japanese formation. Brewer's first burst sent a Zero spiraling down in flames. His wingman destroyed a dive bomber with a deflection shot that removed its right wing. Within 90 seconds, 8 Japanese aircraft were falling toward the ocean. The Hellcat's .50 caliber guns created a lethal convergence at 300 yards where all 6 streams of bullets intersected. At that range, concentrated firepower literally disintegrated Japanese aircraft designed without self-sealing fuel tanks or armor protection. Lieutenant Stanley Swedes from USS Yorktown described the engagement with the straightforward language of men who had witnessed the impossible. They came in perfect formation, like they were on parade. We hit them from above and behind. It was like shooting clay pigeons. They didn't even try to evade. By 1100 hours, the first wave had ceased to exist as an organized force. Of 69 aircraft launched, 42 were destroyed, 27 damaged, and forced to return to their carriers. Only 12 Japanese aircraft penetrated to attack positions, and of those, 7 were destroyed by anti-aircraft fire from the battleship screen. The new proximity-fused shells, a closely guarded American secret, detonated near aircraft without requiring direct hits, creating lethal clouds of shrapnel that transformed the sky into a killing zone. At 11:07 hours, radar detected the second wave, 128 aircraft, launched from Junyo, Hyo, and Ryujo at 0900 hours. This formation included 53 Judy dive bombers, 27 Zero fighters, and 48 torpedo bombers. Lieutenant Commander Kazuo Takahashi, leading the strike, had survived 18 combat missions, including attacks at Coral Sea and the Eastern Solomons. Fighter direction vectored fresh combat air patrol fighters to intercept 60 miles from the task force. The Hellcats held altitude advantage at 28,000 feet versus the Japanese at 19,000 feet. Energy advantage in aerial combat translated directly to tactical superiority. Lieutenant Alexander Vrau's division was among those scrambled to meet the second wave, but mechanical failure struck almost immediately. The supercharger stuck in low blower, limiting his speed to 300 miles per hour and climb rate to half normal. By the time he reached altitude, his squadron mates had pulled ahead to engage the enemy. Vrau spotted the Japanese formation below him, at least 50 aircraft in perfect formation. Judy dive bombers arranged as if for a peacetime review. Despite his mechanical disadvantage, Vrau executed a diving attack from directly above the Japanese formation. His first target exploded immediately, the Judy's bomb load detonating in a massive fireball. He pulled up, rolled inverted, and dove again. The second bomber's tail separated from the fuselage as .50 caliber rounds sawed through aluminum. The third kill came as Vrau pulled out of his dive and climbed back for altitude. A Judy crossed in front of him, and he fired a short burst that set the bomber's fuel tanks ablaze. The fourth victim never saw him coming. Vrau attacked from the bomber's blind spot below and behind, his tracers walking up the fuselage until the aircraft exploded. For his fifth kill, Vrau chased a Judy attempting to escape at low altitude. Despite his reduced speed, he closed to point-blank range and fired. The bomber cartwheeled into the ocean. The sixth and final kill proved the most spectacular. As Vrau lined up his shot, the Judy's bomb load detonated from the heat of burning fuel, creating a fireball that Vrau flew through. In 8 minutes, Vrau destroyed 6 dive bombers, using only 360 rounds of ammunition. His ordnance crew later calculated he had fired less than 5 seconds total to achieve 6 kills. When he landed aboard Lexington, he held up 6 fingers to the bridge where Admiral Mitscher watched. The photograph became one of the war's iconic images, a young pilot's triumph captured in a moment of pure joy. The second wave lost 97 aircraft. Hellcat pilots claimed 70 kills. Ships' anti-aircraft guns destroyed another 20. Only 31 Japanese aircraft survived to return to their carriers, most heavily damaged. The technological gap between American and Japanese aviation had become insurmountable by June 1944. The F6F Hellcat's development represented 3 years of combat experience distilled into mechanical superiority. Production figures told their own story. Grumman produced 12,275 F6F Hellcats in just over 2 years, with peak production reaching 600 aircraft per month. Each aircraft required 20,000 man-hours to construct, yet assembly lines achieved remarkable efficiency through standardization and minimal design changes. The basic F6F design remained essentially unchanged from 1943 to 1945. While Germany and Japan continuously modified their fighters seeking marginal performance improvements, America focused on mass production of a proven design. This philosophy extended throughout American aircraft production. Quantity with adequate quality defeated quality without quantity. At 11:30 hours, Ozawa launched his third Strike 47 aircraft from Zuikaku, Chitose, and Chiyoda. By now, Japanese flight leaders knew the previous waves had encountered fierce opposition, but orders were orders. Lieutenant Yoshio Fukumura, leading 15-0 fighters, had watched the survivors of earlier strikes return with tales of swarming Hellcats and walls of anti-aircraft fire. Radar detected the third wave at 1300 hours, range 120 miles. Fighter direction had refined their interception tactics based on the morning's engagements. Instead of meeting the raid head-on, combat air patrol fighters would attack from multiple directions simultaneously, preventing mutual support among Japanese formations. Commander William Dean from USS Hornet led 20 Hellcats in a high-side attack from the sun. The Japanese fighters, flying protective weave above their bombers, never saw the Americans until tracers started connecting. Dean's first pass destroyed 3 Zeros in 15 seconds. His wingman killed 2 more in the same diving attack. The escort fighters eliminated, Hellcats fell on the bombers with ruthless efficiency. Lieutenant James Shirley from USS Bunker Hill described it with the bluntness of exhausted men. They just sat there in formation while we shot them to pieces. No evasive action, no defensive tactics. They flew straight and level while we made pass after pass. Ensign Wilbur Webb, flying his first combat mission from USS Hornet, encountered the scattered remnants of the third wave. In his after-action report, he wrote, "I couldn't believe they just flew straight and level while I shot them down. After the third one exploded, I started feeling sorry for them. Then I remembered Pearl Harbor and kept shooting." Webb destroyed 6 aircraft in this single engagement, becoming an ace in a day on his first combat mission. 40 aircraft in the third wave. 7 survived to return to their carriers. Not a single Japanese aircraft reached attack position against American ships. The fourth and final wave launched at 11:30 hours. 82 aircraft from the Japanese carrier division, including 30 fighters, 36 dive bombers, and 16 torpedo bombers. This strike included many of the remaining experienced pilots held in reserve for the decisive blow, but the strike became disorganized almost immediately. Navigation errors sent half the formation toward Guam instead of Task Force 58. Those that found the American fleet encountered a wall of fighters stacked from 10,000 to 30,000 feet. The Americans had perfected their defense with fresh fighters constantly rotating through the combat zone. Lieutenant Commander Roger May from Fighting Squadron 2 intercepted the fourth wave 40 miles from the carriers. His division of 4 Hellcats attacked 30 Japanese aircraft. In 12 minutes of combat, they destroyed 17 enemy planes without loss. May personally accounted for 5, methodically picking off aircraft from the rear of the formation forward. The slaughter continued as successive waves of Hellcats rotated through the battle area. Fresh fighters with full ammunition replaced those running low. Damaged Hellcats returned to their carriers, while mechanics and ordnance crews prepared aircraft for immediate turnaround. The American carriers had become a continuous conveyor belt of destruction, launching fighters, recovering them, rearming, refueling, and launching again. Commander David McCall, leading Essex's fighters, demonstrated tactical brilliance throughout the engagement. During the morning battles, he shot down 5 Judy dive bombers in his first sortie. After refueling and rearming, he launched again in the afternoon and destroyed 2 more Zeros over Guam, bringing his day total to 7 victories. His leadership in positioning squadrons for maximum efficiency while managing fuel and ammunition reserves proved crucial to the defense's success. By 14:30 hours, the fourth wave had ceased to exist as a cohesive force. Scattered survivors fled individually toward their carriers or diverted to Guam. American combat air patrol followed them, destroying stragglers across a 100-mile swath of ocean. While Hellcats dominated the air battle, American submarines delivered crushing underwater attacks against Ozawa's carriers. USS Albacore, commanded by Lieutenant Commander James Blanchard, had been trailing the Japanese fleet since dawn. At 09:05 hours, Blanchard fired 6 torpedoes at the carrier Taiho, Ozawa's flagship. 1 torpedo struck the carrier's aviation fuel tanks. The damage seemed manageable initially, but volatile fuel vapors spread throughout the ship. At 14:32 hours, a massive explosion tore Taiho apart. The newest and largest carrier in the Japanese fleet, commissioned just 3 months earlier, sank with 1,650 crew members. USS Kavala, on her maiden war patrol under Lieutenant Commander Herman Clear, detected carrier Shokaku at 1100 hours. Clear fired 6 torpedoes, scoring 3 hits. Aviation fuel erupted through the hangar deck. Bomb magazines detonated in sympathetic explosions. Shokaku, veteran of Pearl Harbor, Coral Sea, and Santa Cruz, sank at 1400 hours with 1,072 men. In 4 hours, submarines had eliminated 2 fleet carriers totaling 60,000 tons of steel. By sunset on June 19th, the arithmetic of destruction was staggering. Japanese losses included 346 carrier aircraft destroyed, approximately 50 land-based aircraft from Guam and Rota eliminated, 2 fleet carriers sunk, and more critically, over 400 pilots and aircrew killed, including most of the remaining experienced aviators. American losses totaled 29 aircraft in aerial combat and operational accidents. Most pilots were recovered. Total American casualties numbered 109 dead from all causes, including anti-aircraft accidents and operational losses. The kill ratio exceeded 15-1 in favor of American fighters. Individual pilots achieved remarkable scores. Lieutenant Alexander Vrau accounted for 6 kills. Commander David McCall scored 7. Lieutenant William Dean achieved 5 kills. Ensign Wilbur Webb destroyed 6 aircraft in his first combat mission. The human dimension behind these statistics was profound. Young American pilots, many in their early 20s, had systematically destroyed an entire generation of Japanese naval aviators. Lieutenant Junior Grade Charles Stimson from USS Cabot later reflected, "It wasn't really combat, it was execution. They came at us in waves, and we shot them down in waves. I felt like I was at a target range." Japanese pilot Saburo Sakai, observing from Iwo Jima, later wrote, "June 19, 1944 was the death of Japanese naval aviation. Our carefully rebuilt air groups, 2 years in training, were destroyed in a single day. The Americans had turned the sky into a slaughterhouse. Those who survived spoke of Hellcats everywhere, above, below, behind. There was no escape." June 20th brought the final act. American search planes located Ozawa's retreating fleet 275 miles west of Task Force 58. Admiral Mitscher faced a critical decision: launch a strike at extreme range, knowing his pilots would return after dark, or let the Japanese escape. At 16:30 hours, Mitscher gave the order, "Launch everything." 216 American aircraft launched in the fading light, 85 Hellcats, 77 dive bombers, and 54 torpedo bombers. They found the Japanese fleet at sunset, attacking through desperate anti-aircraft fire. The strike sank carrier Hio and 2 fleet oilers, while damaging carriers Zuikaku and Chitose, battleship Haruna, and cruiser Maya. Japanese combat air patrol, reduced to fewer than 35 operational fighters, could offer minimal resistance. Another 65 Japanese aircraft were destroyed in this twilight battle. The return flight became an epic of navigation and survival. Pilots flew through darkness with fuel gauges touching empty. Many had never attempted night carrier landings. Radio discipline broke down as desperate pilots called for bearings to any American ship. Admiral Mitscher made perhaps his most famous decision: turn on the lights. Every ship in Task Force 58 illuminated. Searchlights pointed vertically, running lights blazed, flight decks outlined in lights. The risk of submarine attack was accepted to save American air crews. Destroyers fired star shells to mark the fleet position. Cruisers turned on searchlights as beacons. The ocean lit up like a city, guiding exhausted pilots home. Aircraft landed on any available deck. Fuel-starved planes ditched alongside destroyers. Damaged aircraft landed on carriers, their crews pushing them overboard to clear decks for others still airborne. 80 aircraft were lost to fuel exhaustion or deck crashes, but aggressive rescue operations saved most crews. Destroyers assigned as plane guards recovered pilots, sometimes within minutes of ditching. Only 49 airmen from the returning strike force were lost, a remarkable achievement given the circumstances. The Battle of the Philippine Sea, christened the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot by victorious American pilots, marked the end of Japanese carrier aviation as an effective force. In 2 days, Japan lost approximately 480 carrier and land-based aircraft, 3 fleet carriers, and 2 oilers. The pilot losses were catastrophic. Over 445 aircrew were killed, including most remaining veterans. Admiral Ozawa's Operation Ago had assumed rough parity in pilot skill and aircraft performance. Instead, Japanese pilots encountered American aviators with superior training, flying superior aircraft, supported by superior radar and fighter direction. The technological and training gap had become unbridgeable. The Marianas fell to American forces within weeks. B-29 superfortresses based on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam would soon bring the Japanese homeland under sustained strategic bombardment. The November 1944 raids from these bases marked the beginning of the systematic destruction of Japanese cities and industry. Japanese naval aviation attempted one final operation at Leyte Gulf 4 months later, but could muster only 108 aircraft from 6 carriers. Most were shot down without achieving significant results. The carriers themselves were sacrificed as decoys, empty shells of their former power. After Leyte Gulf, Japanese carriers never again launched offensive operations. The Hellcats' dominance reflected American industrial capability and design philosophy. The basic F6F design remained essentially unchanged from 1943 to 1945, allowing maximum production efficiency. While Germany and Japan continuously modified their fighters, seeking marginal improvements, America focused on mass production of a proven design. This philosophy extended throughout American aircraft production. Quantity with adequate quality defeated quality without quantity. Radar technology provided the decisive edge in fighter direction. The SK Air Search radar could detect aircraft at 100 miles, allowing 40 minutes warning of incoming raids. The SM fighter direction radar provided precise bearing and altitude data for vectoring interceptors. Combat information centers integrated radar data with radio communications, creating a real-time battle management system decades ahead of its time. The proximity fuse, one of the war's most closely guarded secrets, revolutionized anti-aircraft defense. These shells detonated automatically when passing near aircraft, eliminating the need for precise altitude settings. The resulting lethality forced Japanese aircraft to attack from higher altitudes, reducing their accuracy. American logistics sustained continuous operations at unprecedented tempo. Task Force 58's service squadron delivered 270,000 gallons of aviation fuel, 7,000 gallons of lubricating oil, and 45 tons of ammunition daily during the battle. Replacement aircraft were catapulted from escort carriers directly to fleet carriers during operations. Damaged aircraft were repaired overnight by maintenance crews working around the clock. The ammunition expenditure was staggering. Task Force 58 fired over 2.4 million rounds of 50 caliber ammunition on June 19th alone. Ordnance crews loaded 15,000 rounds per hour at peak tempo. While technology and training created the conditions for victory, individual pilots executed the destruction. Their stories reveal the human dimension behind the statistics. Lieutenant Junior Grade Milton Curthers from USS Bunker Hill achieved 5 kills, despite having his hydraulic system shot out by a Japanese rear gunner. Unable to lower his landing gear normally, he cranked them down manually while flying with his knees, then landed successfully on the carrier. His plane captain counted 47 holes in the Hellcat's fuselage and wings. Ensign Robert Duncan from USS Princeton was separated from his division during the second wave interception. Flying alone, he encountered 12 Japanese bombers without escort. In a running battle lasting 15 minutes, Duncan destroyed 4 bombers before running out of ammunition. He then used his aircraft to force another bomber to crash into the ocean, achieving 5 kills without firing his last shots. Lieutenant Commander George Duncan, no relation to Robert, from USS Monterey, led a division that intercepted 40 Japanese aircraft. Outnumbered 10-1, Duncan's 4 Hellcats destroyed 19 enemy planes in 8 minutes. Duncan personally accounted for 6, using disciplined fire control to maximize his ammunition. His wingman, Lieutenant Junior Grade John Strain, destroyed 5 more. The coordination between pilots demonstrated American tactical superiority. Divisions maintained mutual support while engaging multiple targets. Wingmen protected leaders during attacks. Damaged aircraft were escorted home by teammates. This disciplined teamwork contrasted sharply with the increasingly desperate individual efforts of Japanese pilots. For Japanese aviators, June 19th was apocalyptic. Pilot Officer Yoshiro Shimamura, one of 15 survivors from carrier Zuikaku's air group, later testified, "We knew we were flying to our deaths when we saw the wall of Hellcats waiting for us. The sky was filled with tracers. Planes exploded everywhere. I saw at least 20 of our aircraft destroyed in less than a minute." Lieutenant Commander Akira Tarui, leading torpedo bombers from Chitose, watched his entire squadron annihilated. The Americans attacked from above, below, and both sides simultaneously. We had no chance to maneuver or counterattack. My gunner was killed in the first pass. My controls were shot away in the second. I crashed into the sea and spent 6 hours in the water before a destroyer found me. The few experienced pilots understood their situation was hopeless. Lieutenant Sadamu Kamachi, an ace with 12 victories, survived by immediately jettisoning his bombs and fleeing at wave-top height. He later wrote, "The young pilots followed their training and maintained formation while being slaughtered. Those of us who survived did so by abandoning all tactical doctrine and running for our lives." Admiral Mark Mitscher's leadership proved decisive throughout the battle. His decision to launch all available fighters against the incoming raids, rather than maintaining reserves, maximized defensive firepower when it mattered most. His controversial choice to illuminate the fleet for returning pilots demonstrated moral courage, risking submarine attack to save his air crews. Mitscher's fighter direction officers coordinated the most complex aerial defense in naval history. Managing over 450 fighters simultaneously required precise coordination between radar operators, fighter directors, and squadron commanders. The system worked flawlessly, vectoring fighters to optimal intercept positions while managing fuel states and ammunition loads. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding 5th Fleet, faced criticism for not pursuing Ozawa's fleet more aggressively. However, his primary mission was protecting the Saipan invasion force. His cautious approach prevented any possibility of a Japanese end run against the vulnerable transports and supply ships. The 50,000 troops ashore on Saipan depended on continuous supply from the invasion fleet. Admiral Ozawa, despite the catastrophic losses, conducted a skilled withdrawal under terrible conditions. His decision to transfer his flag from the sinking Taiho to cruiser Haguro, then to carrier Zuikaku, maintained command continuity. His after-action report honestly assessed the disaster. The enemy's fighter direction and pilot quality exceeded all estimates. Our aircrew training was inadequate for this level of combat. Behind the fighter pilots, thousands of sailors sustained the aerial defense. Plane handlers moved aircraft on crowded flight decks with choreographed precision. Ordnance loaded millions of rounds of ammunition. Mechanics repaired battle damage between sorties. Landing signal officers guided damaged aircraft aboard despite hydraulic failures, wounded pilots, and fuel exhaustion. Aviation machinist Mate First Class Roberto Martinez from USS Lexington recalled, "We turned around aircraft in 12 minutes. Refuel, rearm, check the engine, patch bullet holes with fabric and dope, and launch again. We worked 20 hours straight during the battle. Nobody complained. We knew our pilots were counting on us." The medical response saved numerous lives. Flight surgeons treated wounded pilots between missions, allowing many to return to combat. Pharmacist Mate Second Class James Thompson from USS Enterprise performed emergency surgery on a pilot whose foot was nearly severed by cannon fire. The pilot flew again 3 weeks later with a prosthetic attachment on his rudder pedal. Rescue operations achieved remarkable success. Destroyers assigned as plane guards recovered pilots, sometimes within minutes of ditching. Submarines on lifeguard stations saved aviators hundreds of miles from the task force. OS-2 U-King-Fisher float planes launched from battleships and cruisers rescued pilots from inside Japanese-controlled waters. American codebreakers had provided strategic warning of Japanese intentions weeks before the battle. The decoded Japanese naval messages revealed Ozawa's basic plan, order of battle, and approximate timing. This intelligence allowed Spruance to position his forces optimally and prepare for the expected attack patterns. The capture of the Z-Plan documents from Admiral Koga's crashed aircraft in March 1944 had given American planners detailed insight into Japanese strategic thinking. Every aspect of Operation Ago was anticipated and countered before the first aircraft launched. Radio intelligence units aboard carriers intercepted and translated Japanese tactical communications in real time. Lieutenant Charles Sims, a Japanese language specialist aboard USS Lexington, monitored enemy pilot conversations throughout the battle. His translations provided immediate tactical intelligence on Japanese formations, targets, and damage assessments. One intercepted transmission revealed the depth of Japanese despair. "This is impossible. They know where we are before we see them. It's not fighting, It's murder. Sims translated this in real time, boosting American morale while confirming the effectiveness of fighter direction. The intelligence advantage extended to technical knowledge. Captured Zero fighters had been thoroughly analyzed, revealing every strength and weakness. American pilots knew exact turning radii, climb rates, and vulnerable points. Training programs incorporated this knowledge, teaching pilots precisely how to fight Japanese aircraft. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot fundamentally altered the Pacific War's trajectory. Japanese carriers would never again launch significant offensive operations. The Imperial Navy's carefully rebuilt air groups, 2 years in training, had been eliminated in 8 hours of combat. Production statistics illustrated Japan's impossible position. American factories produced 36,000 combat aircraft in 1944. Japan manufactured 13,000, most of inferior quality, using substitute materials due to resource shortages. American pilot training programs graduated 65,000 aviators in 1944. Japan trained fewer than 5,000, most with minimal flight hours. The technological gap continued widening. America introduced improved fighters like the F-4U-4 Corsair and F-8F Bearcat. Radar systems improved monthly. Proximity-fused anti-aircraft shells made attacking American ships virtually suicidal. Japan had no response, except the desperate kamikaze tactics adopted 3 months later at Leyte Gulf. Strategic bombing from the captured Marianas began in November 1944. B-29s flying from Saipan and Tinian systematically destroyed Japanese cities and industry. The March 1945 firebombing of Tokyo killed more people than either atomic bomb. The atomic bombs that ended the war flew from Tinian's North Field, built on an island captured because Japanese naval aviation could not stop the American invasion. The institutional knowledge lost with Japan's veteran pilots could never be replaced. Flight instructors were pulled from training units to fill combat squadrons, further degrading training quality. By war's end, Japanese pilots averaged less than 40 hours flight time before entering combat. Many never successfully landed on a carrier. The battle validated American training doctrine, emphasizing deflection shooting, energy management, and mutual support. The thatch weave and similar tactical innovations proved superior to Japanese emphasis on individual combat and aerobatic skill. Team tactics defeated individual prowess consistently. Aircraft design philosophy was vindicated completely. The Hellcats' emphasis on pilot protection, firepower, and structural strength proved correct. The Zero's design philosophy, sacrificing everything for maneuverability, had become obsolete. Modern air combat rewarded survivability and firepower over agility. Fighter direction emerged as the crucial multiplier. Centralized control maximized defensive efficiency while minimizing losses. Radar-guided interception allowed defenders to always achieve favorable positioning. The Japanese, lacking comparable systems, flew blind into prepared killing zones. Logistics determined sustainability. American ability to maintain continuous operations, rapidly repair damage, and replace losses created cumulative advantages. Japanese inability to replace losses meant each battle further degraded their capabilities. Attrition warfare favored the side with superior industrial capacity. Training quality proved more important than individual courage. American pilots with 600 hours of training consistently defeated Japanese pilots with 200 hours regardless of determination or fighting spirit. Systematic instruction in gunnery, tactics, and instrument flying created competence that enthusiasm could not match. Veterans of the Turkey Shoot carried their experiences throughout their lives. Alexander Vrau became a test pilot evaluating jets that would define the next generation of naval aviation. He flew the Grumman F6F Bearcat, the Hellcat successor, and later tested early jet fighters. Vrau retired as a commander in 1963, having survived being shot down over the Philippines and spending 6 weeks with Filipino guerrillas. David McCall continued his career, eventually commanding carrier air groups and serving as captain of carriers USS Bonhomme Richard and USS Saratoga. He retired as a captain in 1964, the Navy's all-time leading ace with 34 victories. McCall received the Medal of Honor for his actions on June 19 and October 24, 1944. Many pilots became airline captains, flying the same Pacific routes they had fought to secure. The transition from military to civilian aviation was natural for men trained to fly long distances over water. Their combat experience made them exceptionally capable pilots who could handle any emergency. Japanese survivors faced different futures. Some became Buddhist monks, seeking spiritual reconciliation with their wartime experiences. Others worked in Japan's post-war aviation industry, applying hard-learned lessons to civilian aircraft design. A few wrote memoirs preserving the perspective of the defeated. The psychological impact lasted decades. American pilots spoke of recurring dreams, where Japanese aircraft kept coming in endless waves. Japanese survivors described nightmares of Hellcats attacking from every direction. Both sides carried invisible wounds that time never fully healed. Reunions brought former enemies together in later years. At a 1984 gathering, Alexander Vrau met Sadamu Kamachi, one of the few Japanese survivors from June 19th. Kamachi told Vrau, "You were doing your duty, as was I. I'm glad we both survived to become friends." They corresponded until Kamachi's death in 2001. The battle's legacy endures in multiple forms. Aircraft museums display restored Hellcats and Zeros, allowing visitors to appreciate the physical reality behind the statistics. The National Museum of Naval Aviation's F6F bears Vrau's aircraft, complete with 6 victory flags representing his score. USS Yorktown, now a museum ship in Charleston, South Carolina, includes exhibits on the Turkey Shoot. Visitors can stand in the Combat Information Center where fighter directors vectored Hellcats to their intercepts. The radar scopes, plotting boards, and communication equipment remain as they were in 1944. Maritime archaeologists have located several ships sunk during the battle. Shokaku rests at 12,000 feet, her flight deck still bearing aircraft ready for launch that never occurred. Taiho lies even deeper, her massive hull broken by the explosion that sent her down. These war graves are protected in the Philippine Sea. Historical analysis continues evolving. Newly discovered Japanese documents reveal previously unknown details about pilot training, aircraft production, and command decisions. American records, gradually declassified, show the full extent of intelligence advantages and technological superiority. Veterans' oral histories provide irreplaceable perspectives. The Veterans History Project has recorded hundreds of interviews with Turkey Shoot participants. These first-hand accounts preserve details that official records miss: the smell of aviation fuel, the sound of Hellcat engines, the sight of burning aircraft falling like meteors. Educational programs ensure the battle's lessons reach new generations. The Naval Aviation Museum's flight simulators allow visitors to experience aerial combat from a Hellcat cockpit. Documentary films combine veteran interviews with computer-generated recreations of the battle. These programs ensure the Turkey Shoot accelerated military aviation development. The battle proved that radar-directed fighters could create an impenetrable defense against conventional attack. This lesson influenced Cold War strategic planning, leading to sophisticated integrated air defense systems. The proximity fuse technology pioneered in 1944 evolved into modern smart weapons. The principle of detonating munitions near targets without requiring direct hits extends from surface-to-air missiles to contemporary air defense systems. Fighter direction techniques developed for the Turkey Shoot became the foundation for modern air traffic control. The same principles of radar tracking, vectoring, and centralized control that destroyed Japanese air power now safely guide millions of civilian flights annually. The emphasis on pilot survivability seen in the Hellcat influenced all subsequent American military aircraft design. Every modern American fighter incorporates extensive armor, redundant systems, and escape mechanisms that trace their heritage to lessons learned in the Pacific. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot represented more than tactical victory. It demonstrated that modern warfare had become a contest of systems rather than individual courage. Superior technology, training, logistics, and intelligence created conditions where bravery alone could not prevail. Admiral Mitscher's after-action report stated simply, "The enemy's carrier aviation has been destroyed." That destruction came through the convergence of American industrial might, technological innovation, and human skill. 12 hours of combat on June 19, 1944, eliminated Japanese naval aviation as an offensive force. In the depths of the Philippine Sea, 3 Japanese carriers rest on the ocean floor, their aircraft still in hangars that would never again launch strikes. But the true destruction occurred in the sky, where over 400 Japanese aircraft and their irreplaceable crews met their end against American Hellcats. The disparity was final and irreversible. Japan began June 19th with hopes of a decisive victory that might stall the American advance. They ended it with their carrier aviation effectively eliminated, their strategic position hopeless, and their homeland exposed to the strategic bombing that would culminate in atomic destruction. The Turkey Shoot was not just a battle. It was the moment when technological superiority, training excellence, and industrial capacity converged to create an insurmountable advantage. The age of the samurai aviator had ended, replaced by an era where systematic superiority determined outcomes. Lieutenant Alexander Vrau's 6 fingers held up to Admiral Mitscher became the battle's enduring image. A young pilot's triumph captured in a moment of joy. But behind that gesture lay the fuller truth. American pilots flying. American aircraft, supported by American technology and logistics, had achieved what no amount of Japanese courage could overcome. The Hellcat had lived up to its name, bringing hell from above to those who challenged American naval power. In 8 brutal hours, Grumman's sturdy fighter had transformed the Pacific War's trajectory. The plane that some called the aluminum tank had proven that survivability and firepower trumped agility and finesse. Team tactics defeated individual prowess. June 19, 1944, marked the end of Japan as a carrier power and the beginning of American naval aviation's absolute dominance of the Pacific skies. That dominance would continue through the wars to come and establish the template for carrier aviation that endures to this day. The lessons learned in those desperate hours above the Philippine Sea, the importance of training, technology, and systematic superiority, remain relevant in an age of stealth fighters and precision weapons. The Turkey Shoot stands as history's most one-sided aerial battle. A day when American naval aviation reached its zenith, while Japanese carrier aviation met its destruction. In the span of a single tropical day, the Pacific War's outcome became inevitable. The empire of the rising sun had been eclipsed by the wings of democracy, and the path to Tokyo Bay lay open across the vast Pacific Ocean.